Alright, there I'm gluing the decking part down here on the foredeck of the Flying Cloud. Anyway, let me pick up where I left off before with describing how my model shop is set up. So this is how to set up your model shop for tall shipbuilding, part 2. As I pointed out in part 1 of how to set up a model shop for building a tall ship model, over here I've got all of the various tools that I described, my Lazy Susans with brushes and rasp files, rigging tools over there, other brushes for painting, and then my parts bins with various kinds of ship model parts, and then over here the heavy tools, whatever heavy tools are worth keeping close to a ship model, but like I said, don't keep too many heavy tools around. Here's some extra parts for this current project, hundreds and hundreds of pulleys and various small parts. So the various kinds of glues that I'm using mostly nowadays are these instant glues or close to instant glues, along with an accelerator, and I do keep and use the original traditional kind of wooden cement glues occasionally. Next, over on the model table are, you got to have a lot of measuring devices that are really accurate, and of course I use the calipers all the time to make sure that I'm getting measurements correct. A couple of these dial-up calipers are also very handy for measuring parts and distances. Got a couple of little miter boxes handy to cut wood with. Mallets, wooden mallets are really important, of different weights and sizes. You don't want to hammer things too hard, and these little wooden mallets are inexpensive, so I keep 4 or 5 different ones strewn about my table when I get started. I like these little flat Japanese kind of saws. I think that's what they're called, or Japanese flush cut saws for cutting wooden dowels. And as I mentioned earlier, when I start a project, I'll have about 10 or 15, maybe 20 X-Acto knives all over my work table, and it's really fun at the beginning of a project. I'll go out and buy a couple of boxes of brand new blades, load up all of my X-Acto knives, and then as I grab them, I know that they're ready to go. Really important. And then we end up back over here at the beginning where I started at the tool box, the first little tool holder that has the flat files and rasp files and pens and pencils and so on. So anyway, that's a lot of the model shop. Now let me show you some of the very special tools, some of the specialty items that you got to have when you're building a ship model. First one is, and again, you only have to make this investment once in your life, is a large brick of beeswax. You'll find that you need to use beeswax in delinting all of the rigging line that you use, and I've had this block of beeswax for about 10 years now. I've only bought 2 of them in my life, so I break off little pieces as I need them. That's one of my special little tips, is find a good block of beeswax. Another one of my specialty tools are a couple of shaped pieces of wood. This one that I created because it helps me shape the outside of the wooden ship's hull. And what I do is I'll take a piece of sandpaper and I spray it with an adhesive, a little two-sided or spray adhesive, and then attach that to my curved sanding tool. Once that's dried in place, I trim off the excess, let that dry in place, and then I'll trim off the excess. And this is a pretty handy little tool that I can now use for curved sanding of the hull. Same thing with this odd shaped piece of cut off wood. And of course this is a really neat tool. It allows you to clean off your sandpaper. It's like a big gummy piece of rubber, but you clean off your sandpaper and you'll get 2 or 3 uses out of a piece of sandpaper instead of just one. It really doubles and triples the life of sandpaper with one of these. Now, this current project for the Flying Cloud clipper ship is going to be a fully rigged model with sails. So I'm also going to showing here what it is that I use for sailcloth. I get this email an awful lot from model shipbuilders asking me what kind of material to use. What I did is I bought a bolt, a huge large bolt of what's called Egyptian cotton ducking. This is a real sheer cotton duck, one that you can see through pretty easily, and it replicates the thickness of canvas used on ships when you're getting down to the scales that I'm working in, around 195th to 180th scale. This Egyptian cotton muslin works best of any kind of cloth that I've ever found. And then of course you can take and stain it. I dip it in tea or in some kind of a darkening agent to give it some age if you're going to have it depict aged sails. Usually I hand sew the edges, but recently I've also invested in one of these little hand sewing devices to help finish off the edges. But Egyptian cotton muslin, get yourself a bolt of that and that'll last you a lifetime for building ship models. Well, model ship building is not just about small tools, it's also about some larger tools, so let me show you what the big ones are that I use to make my job so easy. In addition to the small handheld files and sanding tools, I also like to have two of these large belt sanders, one with a fine and one with a medium kind of a grit on them, ready to go when I start a project. So those two are all set out outside. And then for some of the smaller hull sanding, I will use an orbital sander, a full-size hardware store size orbital sander occasionally. And then this is a really handy little tool that I found for only about $10 or $15. It's a sanding tool, full size, but it's got these little tiny triangular tips on it so it can get into the corners. Of course, you don't want to use these too much because they will sand down the model really fast. And then lastly, I do have a full-size painting setup with air compressor and of course my various different air brushes. So those are the big tools that I use for model shipbuilding. Everything else, as you've seen at the model shop inside, are the small handheld tools. Now, in addition to buying your parts from the only two people left in the country that sell ship model parts, Blue Jacket and Model Expo, you can see here some of the store-bought parts that I've purchased for this particular project, the Flying Cloud Clipper ship. In this case, the copper plates that are going to be used on the hull. And there's some copper plates from Model Expo by comparison. These are much more authentic looking, so I'm going to be using those. But the other thing that I suggest is kit bashing. Kit bashing means you find a lot of these ship model kits that somebody has discarded or selling at a yard sale. They might have built part of it, may never have built any of it. In the case of this one here, it's almost completely intact. But a lot of the little parts in these you can't find anymore. They don't manufacture these parts, or they're almost impossible to get. So I always keep my eye open for old-fashioned kits, and then I'll take and scavenge the parts out of them, put them in my parts bin. For example, here are block and tackle pulleys that I've accumulated over the years that I've mostly gotten out of old kits. Same thing with some of the laser cut parts from another kit here. That's kit bashing. So this is where I accumulate a lot of my parts. I either buy them store-bought from Blue Jacket or Model Expo, or I get them from kit bashing, old ship model kits. Well, that's a look around the model shop. So thanks a lot for taking the tour with me. I hope it gave you some ideas of some special tips and tricks and tools to have available to make your model shipbuilding easier. The current project that I'm working on, as I mentioned, is a clipper ship called the Flying Cloud. Here's the beginnings of it. I'll be documenting it in video and in still photographs. By the way, that brings up, make sure that you take an awful lot of still photographs whenever you're building your ship models, and don't forget to post them online. I always have a still camera, one or two. In this case, I've got another one mounted up on the wall over here, and then I've got one on a tripod, as you see right here, along with my video camera. So thank you very much for tuning in. Stay tuned for the building of the Flying Cloud 1851 clipper ship.